Hello everybody, I am so happy to be here in a new year. It's 2024, but that means we get one more chance to look back at 2023. I hope you and yours are having a fantastic new year already, and well, may it be a great year for all of us because, quite honestly, we all need one. With that said, though, we're going to go through the year. We're going to look back at my predictions for the year because I am a stickler for punishment, I guess. We're going to see if I was right about anything in my dumb seasonal forecast. We'll take a look at an upcoming dumb seasonal forecast. I'll talk about when to expect that and also some early thoughts. And then, of course, we're just going to review the year. I think this is going to be a fun video. So with that said, let's get started. So let's talk about 2023. I think this is a really good time to just kind of talk through the different things that happened this last year and really just break down what is the rest of the year is going to look like, okay? So with that said, let's get to the next slide and let's look at my first thing. Well, here's the preseason expectations. Here's what I was expecting in the new year, right? I was thinking the Southern Plain dryline was going to be more active than the last 3 years. If you recall, before coming into this year, the last 3 years had been extremely quiet nationwide, below average. We had also just had a below average plain season. It just seems like we had one or two notable events each year from 2020 to 2022. And well, finally, I think we'll see if we broke through that. Also, there would be more severe storms, setups, etc. on the plains than in the last 3 years. At the time, I thought this wasn't saying much, but it would feel noticeable. And also the access would be more central on an east-west access in the past 3 years, not too far east, not too far west. Also that the slow east march on the plains would then come ramp up all the way into May and June, and then the season would rotate about average. So we'll get to whether I did that well, but first I think it's important just to talk about how the year went. So was the seasonal forecast even right? Like let's talk about like what happened this last year. In that regard, you can see here we had 1,423 tornadoes as of this recording. There may be yet another tornado. Who knows? You never know between now and midnight. But I'm recording this right before the end of the new year. And what you can see here is that there was quite an axis of activity across here, across the Mid-South, the Midwest, and then another one back here on the high plains. And it looks like, and then, there's a pretty good belt through here, but look at that big emptiness there across central Kansas. If you look at the tornado watch frequency map, it kind of bears it out, right? You see this happening. Flip back and forth, you can kind of see how these correlate, right? Tornado watches, apparently they do foretell tornadoes. That's one big takeaway, right? Another one is that look at central Kansas. Look at that southern Nebraska, central Kansas, even in western Missouri. 0 tornado watches this last year. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen often at all. I can't think of a year where we've had 0 tornado watches in Kansas. I'm sure in central Kansas. I'm sure it's happened. I'm sure Wichita has had a year without 0 tornado watches. Maybe not. I may be completely wrong on that, but it was definitely one of those things where that's kind of shocking when you actually look at it. When you look at the severe thunderstorm watch map, it's a different story. Kansas, of course, had severe thunderstorm watches, but there was still a minimum there in eastern Kansas. But you see there is a strong belt of severe thunderstorm watches across the high plains, also some across Texas and into the south here. But you don't see a lot of severe thunderstorm watches further east, and of course almost 0 further west. It seems like the severe weather activity was concentrated outside of tornadoes in that Great Plains region, right? So that was very interesting as well to see this last year. And if you look now, let's go into a month-by-month breakdown because I think it's important to kind of look and see how the season progressed. I think this is a thing that we can look at and just see, see how the year went. So with that said, here's January. There was that rogue tornado event on the plains here in January in northeast Oklahoma. Really wild event, honestly. Very atypical. You don't get 5 tornadoes in Oklahoma too often. But look, the rest of the plains pretty quiet. Had this big series of events down here in the south. at the beginning of the year. Actually, it doesn't look like we're going to have anything close to that, but we ended up with 168 tornadoes in January, which is very atypical, actually. It's above average, to be sure, and most of it can be concentrated in this area right here, these tornado events. But there were a couple very interesting ones up here in Iowa in January, and also Illinois over here in January. Both of those, you don't typically see tornadoes this far north in January, but this year you did. February, well, you had another set of atypical tornado setups right down here in the Southern Plains. This was a really wild day. Brett Wright saw the Norman tornado. Didn't It was hard to see, but he was around the Norman area when this happened. There was a big, quick moving line of storms and the most extreme soundings I think I can ever recall seeing, with 1,000 0 to 1 kilometer SRH across Oklahoma on this night. Is basically like no instability, but so much wind shear that storms spun and produced tornadoes anyways. And then, of course, you had some scattered things, but February was a lot more quieter. It was 55 tornadoes, not that much, only 3 possible EF2 plus tornadoes. And then March came along. You can see down here at the bottom, you can see that a lot of March was quiet. But you see that 31st, and you see it literally goes off the charts. And that was a day that Brandon Sullivan was out in Iowa chasing, and he actually saw a monster tornado on this day. This was probably the outbreak of the season on March 31st across the Midwest and down into the South. It was an absolutely bonkers day. Over 100 tornadoes. Just probably, like I said, the outbreak of the year happened in March, and it was just absolutely a high-end event. You had 27 possible EF2 plus tornadoes. March was kicking. I mean, it was busy. March was busy. March was fast. March was active. March was a very big month. It was 253 tornadoes. I mean, that's about as big as it got this year. As you headed into April, though, 121 tornadoes total. Only 4 possible EF2 plus. And those honestly were all in Oklahoma for the most part. Oklahoma had a couple of pretty big tornadoes that month. These are all preliminary. There actually have been surveys. There were more than that possible EF2 plus tornadoes in April than that, but only 121 preliminary reports. You can see where the activity was concentrated from western Illinois, eastern Missouri, back here to Oklahoma. There was a big tornado event in central Oklahoma on April 19th. I chased that. I call that the night of the twisters in Oklahoma because there were tornado tracks just everywhere, literally going every which way. And those tornado tracks were just absolutely chaotic, and we've done several videos about that. My favorite one is the cards right there popping up. But April was a quiet month, though. April was pretty quiet, all things considered, especially on the plains. You can see how just nothing happening out here on the plains. This was the month that I could actually start chasing post-surgery. I had ankle surgery in February, so February and March were completely out for me, but I was able to start chasing by mid-April. First event of the year was this, and then I chased nothing else in April, actually. And then we go into May, and let's take a look at May. Here is May. Typically, everyone talks about May. When it's May, you chase, right? There's a lot of activity in May across the plains, mostly centered here in central plains, Nebraska, Colorado, some in Kansas, but there was sporadic dry line activity down here on the southern plains, especially in eastern New Mexico, Texas Panhandle, and then there was a big setup or two in early-ish May, and you can see May basically, as you go through the month, you get nothing, you get some stuff here after the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, there were tornadoes, and then literally there was like nothing the rest of the month. It was a very quiet month after the 13th or so, which is quite atypical. It's not what you expect in May. May was very front-loaded, but it was also just not that active, except on individual days. There were a lot of storm setups in May. This was the interesting thing. Only 2 possible EF2 plus tornadoes in May. There were very few strong tornadoes in May. There were very few big tornado reports. These were a lot of weak-ish tornadoes that happened. The jet stream was very quiet. So the heart of the plains storm season was quieter. Would still produce a lot of tornadoes, but the jet stream wasn't that strong. It was a really weird year. This was a weird evolution, in my opinion, because I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how May was happening. It was like every day there was a severe weather setup in a tornado. So if there's a 2% tornado risk, it seemed like almost every day in May somewhere on the plains. But we never really got that big event to come together because there was never really any big jet stream. There was never any big jet stream big trough storm system that came through in May. But then, of course, we get to June. June was bigger than May. June was huge this year. There were a ton of big tornado events. Possible EF2 plus tornadoes 8. There was a big tornado event in June in the southeast, which doesn't happen often. That's not typical. That is not a typical thing. This year was weird. It was just so weird. But you did have the typical. There were some things that were typical. Tornadoes across Colorado in June, right? Not unheard of. Tornadoes in the Texas Panhandle. There were a couple really big ones. The Perryton event, Matador event, and then there were some sporadic tornado events here in Oklahoma as well. I chased the two down here in southwest Oklahoma. Have a video on that one eventually. But June was the big month of the spring. It was also the axis of setups was either west or east. It seemed like the central part of the plains really didn't get a lot of tornadoes again in June. You can see, April, May, and June, there's like a little, the dry line, you can see how it was active in Oklahoma. All those days you had a more active set of setups, but it really did, it was a weird season altogether. July, on the other hand, you kept things up, 117 tornadoes. That was pretty active for July. The big event, of course, up here in Northeast Illinois, tons of tornadoes up there in the Chicago area. That was a big event, but you look back here on the plains, pretty sporadic. But it took its typical northward migration, had some decent tornado events in July across Colorado. August comes around, 148 tornadoes, and again, a pretty decent month for the summer. Lots of activity up here in the Northeast, typical of August. Also, you had the big Yuma event in August, a couple other tornado events across here, and then there were a couple sporadic tornado reports, just even across the West and such. Not atypical. This is all very typical of August. Not shocking at all. Then you have September, 22 total tornadoes only. The season flatlined after August for the most part. There weren't just not that many tornadoes across the U.S. Across September. October, only 55 total, 53 total tornadoes across both months. October, you had some sporadic stuff here in Nebraska. Had this lone tornado report in Oklahoma, which was embedded in a line. Not even that, October again out here. The fall season, September, I don't even know if you can call it the fall season anymore. It's very typical. It's becoming a very low month of tornado activity across the U.S. It just seems like nothing's in place that month. October, though, was not that active. And then November, once again, you had a set up here around the 20th. There were some tornadoes across Louisiana, Mississippi, but only 20 tornadoes in November. Had 46 in December, mostly all on this day here just before the 10th, right there in the central part of Tennessee, southern Kentucky, etc. That's where most of them happened. So that was the season. That was where we were. So let's recap 2023 one last time. Total number of tornadoes as of this recording, well, we're setting at 1,423 tornadoes. That's slightly above average for the yearly count, but only slightly above average. The bulk of the activity this year was based in the Southeast and the Mid-South. This is part of a longer-term trend of increasing tornado frequency in that region. Dr. Walker Ashley was on our channel earlier in 23 talking about this, but you're going to see increasing tornado frequency in that area over the next several years and decades, but also you're going to see slightly decreasing frequency in the plains. But the plains were busy this year. There's going to be more variability from year to year on the plains, but let me be clear about something. I just need to be clear about it, okay? Let's be clear about something. Come here, really close. There's going to be a lot of tornadoes on the plains for the foreseeable future. There's going to be years that it's going to be very busy. So doesn't mean that Tornado Alley is shifting east and the plains are no longer a place where tornadoes are going to happen. There will be more variability than in the past, probably. But there's going to be a lot of tornadoes on the plains. And, well, just a little preview of my thoughts on 2024 might kind of be the case this year. So with that said, there's still a lot of variability. You can see it at action in central Kansas where there were 0 tornado watches. I cannot believe that happened. 0 tornado watches in Wichita, Kansas this year. That is a, almost, I mean, to me it's unheard of, but I'm sure it's almost unheard of. I'm sure it's the most really rare thing to have happen. La Nina tends to shift these tornado seasons east, though. So for that, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that La Nina has that this season was shifted east early. That was not a surprise. What was a surprise might have been how it shifted west so suddenly. Now's the time to do what I want to do. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about my grading system here. What was right, huh? Well, you have, we're going to grade my forecast. You have the green check mark, which means I was right. The exclamation point, question mark, well, partially right. And then the red wrong sign. I'm just going to call it the wrong sign because it was just dead wrong, okay? So the first thing, let's talk about the first prediction, okay? The first prediction, the Southern Plains dry line was expected to be more active than the last 3 years. There's still some capping issues at times, but it'd be much easier to break on days with even modest upper support. Here's the deal. I was expecting this in the sense that there was going to be a few big tornado setups on the plains, and they were going to be centered, on the southern plains, in the western Oklahoma even, but central Oklahoma as well. And this did happen, but it wasn't exactly what I expected, but it was easier to break the cap. There were still some capping issues, but there were a lot of days to chase. It was more active. So with that said, I can't make myself completely right on this. That I can't give myself full marks. So I'm just going to say I was partially right. It was active. It was more active, but it wasn't exactly everything I was expecting. Okay. So with that said, there were more severe setups on the plains than the last 3 years. That wouldn't be saying much, but it would probably feel noticeable. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and that's absolutely right. We had so many. I chased 30 times this year. There was a steady drumbeat of setups. There's just so much to chase. So many small time days, though, not many big time days. But it was a year where there were a lot of days to chase. This was absolutely right. The axis will be more central on an east-west plane than in the past 3 years. No, I got that wrong. You saw it in the video, right? You saw it in the numbers. The season started way east, had a lot of tornadoes in March east of the plains. April was very quiet. Mid-May was very quiet, except for those big days in central Oklahoma. And then you got to late May, everything was shifted like way west, right? So there were a lot of tornadoes on the plains in those months, but it was more west than I expected, so that was wrong. A slow and east March, though, shifting west in April with a busier May. June won't be terribly quiet this year either. To explain myself, I was expecting March to be pretty much devoid of setups for the most part. Absolutely, that was the case. There was a huge day in late March. Huge day in late March. But that was all east. Everything March was east. You saw it on the map earlier. So I'm giving myself a pass on March. I think I was right about it. And then shifting west in April. The setups did shift west in April. I was not expecting April to be too busy, though. Heard me say it in that video. If you watched it, I said April I wasn't too optimistic about, but then May would be busier. I thought June was going to be gangbusters in the month of the spring. So yes. Oh, this one absolutely right. I feel absolutely confident that I nailed this. I feel like I nailed the flow of the season. And then the season to rotate around average on the plains plus or minus 15%. Yes, the count was absolutely there. So hey, guess what? I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good about my grade this year. 3 absolutely right, 1 partially, and 1 absolutely wrong. So with that said, we're looking ahead. We're going right into this, right? The STEM 2024 seasonal outlook. It is coming soonish, and I cannot wait because this year, we'll see what happens. It's an El Nino year, right? So it's very different than 3 straight La Nina years. It's different than a triple dip La Nina. I feel pretty good because last year, even despite it being a triple dip La Nina and that being historically slow, the 2 times that it happened prior, this year was closer to average. I feel good about going against that trend. So we'll see how this year's El Nino works out. I've got a lot of data to look at, but that outlook is coming very soon. But until then, remember, weather's for everybody. you need to subscribe because we got a lot of really cool stuff coming. So if you haven't looked, seen this channel, don't know what's going on, you're just interested, like a weather tornado channel that talks tornadoes, this is really cool, you want to subscribe because we've got a lot of stuff coming live. Storm chasing, education is all there. And hey, have a happy new year. Have a great new year. And we'll see you next time.